Welcome to part 22 in this series of videos on how to create a purchase order system using Blazor and C#. In this video, we're going to look at restricting particular records by user. It would be reasonable for an application such as the purchase order system to have a number of different roles, with the highest access role having access to everything and the lowest having access only to orders entered by themselves. There could also be intermediate levels that had access to all purchase orders, but not to systems tables such as tax rates or possibly supplies and products, for example. We'll now explore this type of scenario by introducing a manager role that has access to all purchase orders and to the supplies and products tables, but not the tax rate table. Users who are not in the admin or manager roles will only have access to the purchase orders entered by them, and that is the particular aspect that we'll be covering in this video. So we'll start by running the identity manager and adding a role called manager. So within identity manager, we've currently got 2 users, and if we look at roles, we've just got 1 role. So I'm now going to add a new role called manager. And I'm now going to swap over to the purchase order system to add a new user in there, to register a new user in there. So this is the startup page for purchase orders, and I'm going to register a new user. I'm going to call it Sarah. So that's confirmed. So if we go back to purchase orders, and now I'm going to swap back over to the identity manager and just refresh that. And look at the users. So now we've got Sarah here. I'm now going to edit Sarah and add her to the manager role. So that's got things set up, but to restrict the menu items, we now need to go back into purchase orders and make some changes to the nav menu. So on the nav menu, we've currently got authorized view roles admin around all the items here. Now what I'm going to do is take that and copy it, and I'm going to paste it around supplier product and put in there comma manager, and take authorized view and copy that and close off that first one. So we now, if we run it, we should find and log in as Sarah, we should find that she can, I've got this around the wrong way. I want her to have access, no, that's right. So Sarah will have access to suppliers and products, but she won't have access to tax. So log in. So Sarah has access to purchase orders, supplies and products, but not the tax rates. Notice also that she also has access to all the orders, so she can see everyone's orders. So this is the bit we're now going to be tackling to make it so that if you're not a manager or an admin, you only see your own purchase orders. So at the moment, I'm logged in as Sarah. If I log out and log in as John, you'll see that I'm logged in as John, but John can see everything. John isn't in the admin or manager role, and I now want to change the system so he can only see orders that have been requested by himself. So let's have a look at how we can do that. Back in the C# code, it's going to be the index page that's going to be mainly affected by this. And currently, when the index page opens and is initialized, it gets a list of purchase order objects from the purchase order PO header list. And that's the bit that we want to change so that we pass a parameter to that to determine whether or not the user is in an admin or a manager role. If they are, we want to return all the PO headers, or alternatively, if the user isn't in either of those roles, we want to pass the username into that SQL stored procedure so we can restrict it by that user's identity. So we're going to need to do several things. We're going to need to find out here whether the user is in a particular role or not, and if not, we need to pass in their username. We need to change the SQL stored procedure, and then we'll need to change the PO header service and the interface, the IPO header service. So we'll start with the Razor page, and to determine whether a user is in a role and their user name, up at the top here, we need to inject the authentication state provider. So that's step one on here anyway. Step two is that we need to add a cascading parameter, and it's private task authentication state, and then the authentication state task get and set. Now, I'm now going to create a new method to determine the user's identity, role, and username, and I've called it get order list. So what I'm going to do is in this particular method, I'm going to get the user from the authentication state task, and then if the user is in role admin or is in role manager, I'm going to use the PO header and then wait the PO header service, PO header list. I'm going to be passing null in, i.e. I'm going to be leaving the username blank. But if they're not in either of those roles, I'm going to be passing in the user identity name into the PO header list service. So what I'm going to do then, and the reason I've got this as a separate method, is there are two places where I'm populating PO header. I'm doing it up where the page is initialized, but I've also got it here, and I'll need to change that and this item up here. But let's get the actually, why don't I do that to start with? So what we want to do there is await get order list. We'll probably have some errors for the moment because we haven't finished everything else off. And where was it? Down here. So let's have a look at the SQL to start with. And the current PO header list is this. It's whatever it is, and it's the condition, the where clause is where PO header is archived is 0. Now in there, we want to check whether there's a parameter being passed in, and if not, then we're going to return all the items, or if there's a username being passed in, we want to use that. So we need to do two things. First of all, we need to pass in the username. So I've got this pre-typed. So that's being passed in as the parameter. And this is the tricky bit. So the where clause, I'll copy this in a minute, but it's saying where the PO header requested by, and then I've got it's effectively an if statement saying case when the username is null, then the wildcard. So I've used like and the wildcard, and that will return everything. I did have equals then the wildcard, but that didn't return any, so we need the like in there. I have slight misgivings about that with regard to performance, but I don't think for our size of application it will matter. So if the username is null, then it gets everything. If the username is present, it will then do it'll test whether PO header requested by is the username, and it'll therefore restrict it. So let's just copy that into the stored procedure and replace this and parse it, execute it. So we've now changed the stored procedure. So we could test this, and the way to test it is to execute it. And I'm going to pass a null value in to start with, i.e. we're not passing in a username, and we get everything returned. If I try running it again, and excuse me while I type in John at blazorcode.uk and then click OK, we get one record returned. So the stored procedure is working. So back in the code, we've made the change to this, but we need to now make changes to the PO header, not the PO header service rather. And where we've got PO header list, we want to replace that where we're passing in a parameter. So let me just comment that out to start with. And we're going to replace it with that. And so we're getting a list of PO headers, and we're passing in the username. We're returning or declaring an IEnumerable of PO headers, and we're passing in the one parameter, the username, and that's the stored procedure we're running. So that's the change there. And basically I've copied one of the other stored procedures that was very similar to this, where we were just getting one returned. So the other one we need to change is the IPO header service, and we need to replace the header list there. I'll comment that out to start with. And I need to replace it with that. Right, I think that should be it. So let's run it and see what happens. So the acid test, let me log in as John to start with. and lo and behold, we can only see John's orders requested by John. So let's log out and log in as Sarah. And Sarah can see all the orders, and she can see suppliers and products but can't see tax rates. So that all looks good. But at this stage, I did spot a problem. If I go to pens, for example, and choose to edit it, lo and behold, it's going to change the requested by from the original, which was Christopher, to Sarah. So if I cancel that, you'll see it was Christopher. If I try editing it, it gets changed to Sarah. So we've got a problem on the add edit order. So let's have a quick look at that. And that's going to be on the purchase order page. And what we've got is, this is where we're getting the username and assigning it to the order add edit requested by. And that's on the initialization of the form. And we've got this special section here if the PO header ID is 0. And we really want that to go in here. So I'm just going to chop the whole of that out and put it in this section. So now it'll only change the requested by if we're adding a new order. If we're editing an order, that shouldn't make any difference. Let's try changing that. And you'll see that the requested by hasn't been changed. Now I've made that change, and it did occur to me halfway through changing it, well, perhaps you do want the last person to have added or edited an order to be the one whose name is on there. So that might be something that if you're creating this kind of application, you might need to think about. It does provide some kind of audit trail of who last left their dirty fingerprints on this, but actually I wanted to have the requested by to be the person that originally requested it. So I think that's it for this video. If you've got any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. As usual, I'll put a description in the description. I'll put a link to the website post and to the code for this. And thank you very much for watching.